Good morning, class. We're going to take a look at doing some labeling and reviewing the labeling from the assignment that you completed previously on the heart. And we're going to infuse a few slides of notes and sort of combine these efforts. So if you want to have your heart ID worksheet handy, and we'll take a look at some structures within the heart. We'll first take a look at the heart anatomy. We know that human hearts have 4 chambers to them here. I have my cool lightsaber pointer. And 2 atria on the top, right and left, 2 ventricles, right and left. Remember the orientation of the right and the left when we're looking on a piece of paper. It's backwards to how we would envision that. The atria in the top receive blood, so blood's coming in from the trunk, the head, arms, and legs. And we notice that the atria are very thin-walled. Sometimes we call it the auricles. Okay, on the bottom, the ventricles are much thickened. They will pump blood to the body or pulmonary circulation as well, so you could mention that there. If we were to take a look and prepare a coronal section, like we see here with the heart has been sections, we see the 4 chambers, right atria, left atria, right ventricle, left ventricle. There's some structures we'll be labeling here as well. And the path can make a complete circuit through the heart. There's some other structures on here that we'll get into a little bit later for the cardiac cycle. The heart is separated by this middle piece called the septum, and basically divides the heart into 2 pathways. The right side being the pulmonary circuit, and the left side being the circuit for systemic circulation. Within the heart itself, we'll be labeling some of these structures. We know that there are some valves to keep the blood flow in check. One of the first valves you would encounter is this tricuspid valve here, 3 flaps of tissue, hence the tricuspid nomenclature. On the left side of the heart, there's only 2 cusps, sometimes called the mitral valve, and these valves are to keep the blood flow in a positive direction, so there's no backflow. Sometimes in coronary heart disease, you can end up with a situation called congestive heart failure, where those valves aren't moving blood in a positive direction. There's some weakening in the heart, and you can have pressures that build up, and that's not good for circulation. You can see edema in some of the systemic tissues in the body or in the lungs. That's why we refer to it as congestive heart failure. Leaving the heart to either the aorta, or the pulmonary trunk, we have semilunar valves. There's 2 types, the pulmonary semilunar valves here, or the aortic semilunar valves, again leading to the aorta. And keeping those in check are these structures called chordae tendineae. Think of them as little parachute cords. They attach to these papillary muscles. These are the muscles embedded in the wall of the heart, and we'll be labeling those in just a moment. All right, so if you have your heart ID worksheet ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and try to label these as best I can so you can follow along and check your work. One of the first things we need to remember at the top, that this side of the heart is going to be the right and this is going to be the left. I will probably end up using some abbreviations on the right and left. We'll also be using the letters A and V to mark arteries and veins. All right, in no particular order, I'm going to try to work my way down from top to bottom, labeling some of these structures. So the first one we have is external jugular. On that side, right below it is internal jugular. And then below that one is the subclavian artery. And I'll use the letter A to mark those. On the right side of the diagram, we have the subclavian artery and the subclavian vein. Now remember, for circulation, the vessels leaving the heart would be arteries, and vessels that are returning blood flow would be venous. Moving along, we have the brachiocephalic artery and the brachiocephalic vein on that side. Brachiocephalic, brachium referring to arm, and cephalus meaning head. 19 is the aorta, large structure in the heart. 20 is a very interesting structure. If you remember from the fetal pigs, we had the ligamentum arteriosum. Let's fix that. Ligamentum. Oh, here we go. Ligamentum arteriosum. I can't fit it on my diagram there. That was a bypass in fetal circulation that becomes a ligament. There's no reason to skip the pulmonary circuit, so that shut down, forcing blood flow into the lungs. If you remember, in fetal circuit, blood is coming up through the pulmonary trunk, and some of it goes into the pulmonary circuit, but most of it skipped that circulation right into the aorta here, and bypassing circulation. Well, in an adult heart, that becomes the ligamentum arteriosum. Back to the left side of the heart, let's see, number 6 is the superior, let me fix my color. We'll change that, superior vena cava. I'll just abbreviate there. And right next to it is the aorta. Following that, be careful with these. The first one being the pulmonary artery for number 8. Number 9 is the pulmonary trunk. And number 10 is the pulmonary vein. These are backwards in circulation. Remember, veins are returning blood flow to the heart, and arteries are taking away from the heart. Over on the right side, 21 would be the pulmonary artery. On this side, now remember, for all of these structures, we would denote whether they are the right or left pulmonary vein, right and left pulmonary artery, and so forth. 22 would be the pulmonary vein. And 23 is the atrium. That would be the left atrium. 24 is a vessel called the circumflex artery. 25, we call it the anterior, see if I can fit it in here, interventricular artery. This would be the anterior ventricular vein for 26. 27 is the ventricle. And 28 is the apex of the heart, the bottom portion of the heart. Let's finish this up on the other side. This is the right atria on the right side. Number 12 is called the coronary artery. And 13 is the coronary vein. 14 is the ventricle on the right side. That'll be the right ventricle. 15 is the inferior vena cava. And lastly, 16 is the descending aorta. So there we have all of our labels. Let's move on to the next page. And again, as we start at the top, I'm just going to use some red here to remember. This would be the right side of the heart, and this would be left. Okay. We'll start with the top here. That's the aortic arch. Then we have the pulmonary artery for 41, and the pulmonary trunk. That's the large vessel. Many times during dissection, students often want to call the pulmonary trunk the aorta. It's the most anterior vessel, and it's very prevalent, but the aorta actually is just to the right of that on the heart structure. Let's see, 43 would be atria, and that would be the left atria, because we're on the left side. Moving to the other side of the heart briefly, this one would be, 29 would be the pulmonary artery. 30 would be the aorta. 31 would be the superior vena cava. Many of these you could see from the last drawing, so we're kind of being redundant here. And 32 and 44, let's talk about those two. These are called semilunar valves. I'm going to use my little lightsaber pointer here. I like this. You have the semilunar valves here. They're two cusps of tissue. This one leading into the pulmonary circuit, so that would be the pulmonary semilunar valve, or PSL. Not short for pumpkin spice latte. And then you have the ASL, the aortic semilunar valve here. So let's go ahead and label those now. So this would be the PSL. Oh, what happened to my nice color? And on this side, we have the ASL. I'm going to switch to black. I don't think that's going to come out very well. 33, these are interesting. 33 are these muscles that line the atria. They're called pectinate muscles. and it kind of makes that surface kind of very variegated and sort of interrupted. So let's label those. Get my color here. And that's wrong. Okay, got my color back and highlighted some of those. So 33 is the pectinate. Muscle. It occurs in those atria. We'll see some other structures in a moment in the ventricles. They have a different term. 45 is going to be what we call the bicuspid. Oops, I just lost my writing utensil. Or sometimes referred to as the mitral valve. It's two cusps of tissue on the left side of the heart, separating the left atria from the left ventricle. 34, let's back to the right side. This is the atria on the right side. 35 is the pulmonary trunk. I'm just going to abbreviate here. 36 is another flap of tissue separating. We call these the atrioventricular valves. This one's referred to as the tricuspid. As you can identify, it has three cusps of tissue that make up the valve structure. 37 are these cord-like structures here. I'll circle them on the diagram. These are called chordae tendineae. And these serve to anchor the cusps of tissue in the valve so that we can encourage the movement of blood in one direction. Sometimes those valves might prolapse and cause a problem. All right, so we have the chordae tendineae. Last couple, and we'll finish this up really quick. The inferior vena cava there, and then the descending, whoop, I lost my pointer again, descending aorta are these structures. Last couple on the right side. Here we have this structure called the papillary muscle. These are muscles along the wall of the ventricles that anchor those chordae tendineae, keeping those valves in check from prolapsing. 47 is called the septum. This is the muscular band of tissue in the middle. I'm going to draw it in here that separates the right from left side. Very important. And the last one is that the variegation we see in the atria, it has a different name in the ventricles. It's called trabeculae carinae. And it just makes for an interesting pattern in the walls of those muscles. Okay, yeah, you see here there are a few questions. When we are finished with our discussion, what we will do is I'm going to type these up as a Google form, and we can have you answer some questions following this presentation for those letters. All right, let's move on. The last slide we have here is just to highlight some of those vessels. If you remember, the heart is a muscle itself, and it does have its own blood supply. One of the questions previously talks about the two pathways or circuits that you can see in the heart. But we know the heart being its own, being a muscle, needs its own blood supply. So we see some vessels here. We mentioned the circumflex artery, and some of these coronary vessels, veins and arteries, supplying blood to the heart tissue itself. If you were to flip the heart around on the back, okay, as the blood makes its way through the coronary circuit, it all ties back in together. These cardiac veins meet together in this coronary sinus. Now, this coronary sinus is going to return blood flow back into the vena cava system, back into circulation, making a third circuit, pulmonary circuit, the systemic circuit, and what we call coronary circulation. All right, I think that is it. What we'll do is we will put those questions together. I'll post this on Google Classroom and make this available to you. I hope things are going well. Have a great day. See you guys.